All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Golden Dice podcast. My name is Jack, and this week we have the better of the two. We got Tommy with us.
Oh, man. I don't know about that, but I am happy to be here.
Well, I mean, you know how it goes. If Shane's not here, I got to trash him. If Shane's here, I got to trash him.
That's fair. That's the golden rule. I think they forgot that in the Holocron document or in the RRG. That should be the golden rule.
Yeah, it's like during setup, you like one of the setup phases is insult Shane, even if you're not playing against him.
It's called the golden dice rule.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a shame they didn't put it in there. That was the biggest thing I was looking for.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we kind of been popping back between Tommy and Shane, but I've been enjoying it because it gives different perspectives each week, and Tommy can correct all the things Shane said and I said last week and let us know where we were wrong.
No, that's not not the case. I did listen though.
I did. There you go. I'm surprised. How'd you get through it, dude? How'd you get through it?
Oh, I needed a lot of visual distraction since, my ears were bleeding.
You're just playing with your kid the whole time and ignoring us, really.
Yeah, his crying drowned you guys out, so it was good.
Perfect. This week is a little different. I didn't make our weekly tournament. It was draft this week, but I was not able to go. And Tommy, for some reason, keeps having these weird obligations, so he never makes it to a weekly tournament. So
let me tell you about the 4-round event that I went up against some dirty diapers. The first round was a total blowout.
In whose favor?
Not mine. That's pretty much been my Destiny experience. I haven't even had a chance to be on TTS at all in like the past 2 weeks, but I've got a play date scheduled with Scott, so we're going to get some time in. He's going to visit with the baby, and we're going to hammer out a few games of Destiny, I hope.
Nice. I hope that goes well, man. You're a little rusty.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter if I get smashed. I'll just be happy to play.
It's just a matter of playing, and yeah,
I'm just happy to roll some dice.
I feel like even after playing like games on TTS, like I still have the urge to just roll physical dice. Like it's just so much more fun.
I way prefer the in real life component of just feeling the tangible dice and seeing your opponent and being able to read your opponent.
Yep.
I mean, there's only so much of that happens when you get used to the same people. You know everything they're going to do practically before they do it, but it's still good to have that interaction.
Yeah, man. My favorite part of Sabine was the face after I'd never tell him the odds and run interference. But we'll get to that stuff. We'll get to that juicy stuff. We'll just, since we don't have a weekly recap, man, we'll jump right in. We're going to go through the rules reference that is they put out.
Yeah, I mean, well, let's get to the big news. The big news is Spot Gloss Afra, and Shane's not here.
Oh, yeah. Well, I heard he was driving up to PAX and just mugging people as they leave and seeing if they have an Afra on them.
That sounds like him, yeah.
He doesn't even know if they played in the event. He's just mugging people as they walk out.
He's that kind of trash. That's just all there is to it. He's that kind of scum. So your generation sucks.
I'm just really hoping that I don't think it's been confirmed yet, but I'm just hoping these Spot Gloss stuff are at Worlds, so I can just grind my brain out and get a bunch of these.
Yeah, that would be nice for those going to Worlds, because the prize support for the Galactic Qualifier specifically has been just on point. It's been amazing. So hopefully they carry that over, and the prize wall at Worlds is just littered with the beautiful, shiny, amazing Spot Glosses everywhere. I want you and Joe to just bring back stacks of them.
Yeah, depending on how it goes and how many games we're able to grind out, which should be a good amount. I mean, you figure I'm playing Thursday, so like Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and hopefully I'm playing Sunday too. Fingers crossed. But either way, those 3 days I can just grind pods really and get more tokens or tickets or whatever they are that I can use to get them and walk away with a bunch. Because I would even like to do some type of raffle, give it away back to our fans, or like some type of promotion where we can kind of give away some Spot Gloss cards. We'll see.
We have fans? Like the kind that you plug in and they help circulate air throughout a room? Is that what you're talking about?
Right on my desk, I have like 3. It's really hot here.
Nice. I have one hanging from my ceiling.
Okay, nice.
That actually came out so wrong.
Man, you are a dad now with those jokes.
Yeah, that was a totally unintentional joke, but I guess I'll take it.
All right, moving on from that awful joke, and then further and away from that conversation. we're going to dive right into the rules reference. So we're going to cover all the red text. I'm just going to scroll through the rules reference, and we will just read any changes that there were to anything. So these are small details of rules type things or clarifications all the way to the erratas. And there were no balance of the force. So really just the erratas will be the only changes to any card. So starting off, there was a change to a dice under the part 2, the dice and symbols. Underneath symbols, it now changed to say each side of a die may have a symbol on it. And the may have is in red, so that's new. So that means not all dice may even have a symbol. And they use the example of lure power, where it's just the +1 or +2. Same thing with the training remote, which is like +1, +1, +2. So those +1s aren't actually a symbol. They just are what they are. You know, they're not blanks, but they're not symbols either. So
yeah, I think that this is, I mean, very rarely is this ever going to come up in a game. I think one of the only instances that comes to mind might be force misdirection in conjunction with the training remote, or possibly something in draft along those lines with force misdirection and lure of power. That's really the only kind of stuff that I can think of.
Yeah, that or like a doubt or hidden motive on, or more so hidden motive if you're picking a symbol.
Yeah, hidden motive for sure is another great example.
Yeah, but yeah, force misdirection was what popped into my mind too, as both. Well, the trainer remote is blue hero, but lower power is the villain card. So those were the only things that pop into mind. Probably not too often you'll see or need that ruling, as nobody runs lower power or trainer remote. So
this is true.
Going down, another change is indirect damage. I guess they clarified the wording on that. And it says, deals damage to an opponent's characters equal to the value of the symbol distributed as that opponent wishes. And I think they just clarified that it has to be opponent's characters, because ranged and melee damage you could technically resolve against yourself, whereas indirect damage, it seems like you're now forced to resolve it to an opponent's character.
Yep. I'm not sure. It seems like the wording, deal damage to an opponent's character equal to the value of a symbol distributed as that opponent wishes. So, did the old indirect damage say that you deal the, so if you resolved a die for indirect damage, did it read that I would then distribute and deal that damage? Was it almost like I was dealing the indirect damage?
Yeah, it might have, because I think they clarified that. I guess you're getting at Afra.
I don't know. I didn't even think of that.
Oh, okay.
I was just trying to figure out, because I guess that is a situation where it matters who's dealing the indirect. So I think that might be part of it, and also that you can't deal it to yourself. Again, I guess for Afra. Yeah,
my only thinking was that it's technically now dealt by your opponent, right? You can't get dealt it and then have it changed.
Yeah, I think these are the minor changes, but it's nice to see some housekeeping. You know, when things could be vague or issues could crop up in the future where if things aren't lining up properly in the wording of stuff. So it's nice to see them just kind of clean it all up and try to keep it on the up and up as much as they can. Like to see a little more consistency, keeping everything uniform.
Yeah, and here's the old indirect. It said force an opponent to deal damage to their characters equal to the value of the symbol distributed as they wish.
So it was actually your opponent is technically, or someone could make the argument that your opponent is dealing the damage to themselves, which would be cause to believe that they could draw a card with Afra, I guess. Is that correct?
Yeah, that I think that's where the clarification just came from, with stuff like that. But yeah, so nothing too crazy, just kind of cleaning up the wording on indirect. Now some little bit less interesting stuff. It's on page 14, it's playing a card from hand, and it just updated. It says if playing an upgrade, choose a character it can be attached to.
Okay, I guess so.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the whole paragraph that says before a player plays a card from hand, they should first check to see if there are any play restrictions on the card. If there are, and those conditions are met, then a card are not met, then a card cannot be played. If playing an upgrade, choose a character it can be attached to.
Okay. That one strikes me as the strangest of them all so far.
Maybe it might be something along the lines. So, like we've talked about, like electroshock, a spot yellow. Say your yellow character's dead, you try to play that. technically you would have to burn that card and that resource.
No, but see, spot is different than a play restriction.
Yeah,
Spot is a requirement for the ability. Play restriction
Yes.
is you cannot play that card.
Exactly.
So that's why this is odd to me. I think that this, I mean, unless this has some future consequence, I'm not really following them on this. But again, I mean, I'm all for just, you know, clarifying, making it as clear as possible. I like transparency.
Again, that's what I think. Now that it's put into that zone, like it just kind of forces players that they would have to take that back, because some people would try to, you know, like if they try to play Maul Saber on Boba, some people would say, like, try to argue that you could now have to burn that card, but it's like you said, it's a play restriction, not a spot thing. So Maul Saber would just have to go back in your hand and you would get your resources back, and that's that.
Okay. So
I think that's kind of what's getting at. But,
I could see where you're going with that. So part of playing a card from a hand, specifically an upgrade, part of that process is choosing an eligible character for it to go on. So if you can't complete that, you can't actually play the card.
Yep.
So it just clarifies it so people can't. I think that was the general idea anyway. I don't think I've ever seen or even heard of that coming up in any games, but yeah, I mean that, you know, it prevents any negative play experiences, so that's good. Yeah,
and then later down, it says once the card has been paid, the card resolved based on its type, and then there's a change to playing an upgrade, and the red part said upgrade is attached to the chosen. That's the red part, and then it finishes out character by placing it next to or below that character. So just going back to that same thing of having to pick that first.
Okay.
Later, same page, resolved dice. Highlighted, it says each side of a die may have a symbol. So that's just going on that first thing that we read about lore power and training remote. And then later it also says if a player's effect would resolve an opponent's die, that die is resolved as if it were that player's pool instead. So I think this matters for stuff like Seeker Droids, where it's constantly checked, right? If somebody has 3, but now you resolve that Seeker Droid as your own, it would be as 1 instead of 3 if it was your opponent resolving it.
Yep. I guess it would also matter if it was indirect as well, because if it was indirect, that wouldn't really work. And with the new wording.
Yep. Cool. So yeah, some straightforward stuff. Going down to page 21, remaining health. Remaining health is the health of a character minus the amount of damage on it. Thank you.
Okay.
If you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out.
Yeah. I got nothing on that one. I really got nothing.
No, I do not either. The next one is pretty interesting. I think Scott will be jumping for joy once he hears this. Search. Now, when a player searches for a card, that player is allowed to look at all of the cards in the search area without revealing them to opponents. A player does not have to find the object of a search effect. So you could play lightsaber pull and not get a lightsaber, but shuffle your deck. I have trouble seeing where that would be super impactful, but I remember Scott doing it and it mattered to him, but that's just something he probably sees and I don't.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I'm sure there are some very extremely specific situations where that may matter. I don't think that it is going to be a very relevant play very often. I don't anticipate people doing that and changing the meta at all.
I don't just see, like, play lightsaber pull because you're about to get hit with Mind Probe, but why wouldn't you just discard to reroll 0 anyways or something like that? I don't know. I don't really know what it would be.
I mean, you can look through if you're not as familiar with your deck, I guess, you could play lightsaber pull to see what you have left. If you're digging for something, you could say, all right, how many Boundless are in here or whatever, and you could look if maybe you're playing with a friend's deck. I guess that's one situation. It's not an extremely competitive situation, but
we'll have to get Scott to explain why he wanted that, or if anybody listening knows why.
I don't remember what the exact situation was. You know what it was? I think it was. It had to deal with Kylo Ren's Starfighter, so it was similar.
Yeah, he was just trying to get rid of blue.
I think so. I think that might have been it.
But again, I just don't know why. He could have
discarded to reroll 0. Yes. So.
Yeah, that would be my only question. Like, why is it more beneficial? Like, maybe there's something there that we aren't thinking of right now as to why that would be more beneficial.
I don't know.
So yeah, so you can search and not have to find an object, which is interesting for sure.
That might have later, it might have a bigger impact later in the game's life.
Yeah, who knows what cards are coming out in the next set or two, or even so. The next change is unblockable damage, and the red wording says all modifiers added to a die that deals unblockable damage will also be unblockable. So just kind of clarifying Vibrant Knife, really.
Yeah, I feel like that's redundant. I feel like that was not an issue. I think we understood how that worked for the most part. I'm sure there are some people that were fuzzy on it. So again, clarification is good.
Yeah.
In almost all situations. Just I'm not sure it was at the top of my list for things that were needed.
I do remember when the change first happened to Vibrant Knife on Facebook, there was a lot of posts about, what exactly would be unblockable, but I thought that was pretty much figured out. But, I guess it's clarification. So that is that for whatever part of the rule section we were just in. And now we're at 23, which is the errata. And 2 cards were hit, one from Empire War and one from Legacies. And Run Interference was the card of Empire War that was hit. And Run Interference should now read, after you take an action, you may set this support aside to choose an opponent. That opponent cannot take the same action that you just took on their next turn. Context. This card can create a poor play experience by repeatedly preventing player interaction. This change makes the ability no longer repeatable. Any thoughts on that, Tommy?
Part of me sad. I liked Running Interference, and I'm not so sure that this hurts it in the way that I think is the biggest impact. I think the obvious big bad play experience is Running Interference. Never Tell Me the Odds, or to a lesser extent Concentrate or Alter or something along those lines. So I understand why those could feel bad play experiences. I've had them happen to me, and it's disappointing, when you're like, oh, well, I was winning, but now I'm getting, smashed for 12 damage and I can't do anything about it. And it can be frustrating, but I don't think that this impacts that at all. What it does is it slows down the tempo of decks that use this card. It prevents players from slowing their opponents down, and it prevents the higher skill plays of locking your opponent into a position where they must pass. So then you can potentially pass and end the round. For instance, if your opponent has 1 card remaining in hand, but still has a good amount of dice to resolve, and you have a discard side showing on a die, you can resolve your discard side and tap Running Interference, say resolve dice. And as long as your opponent has no actions on cards that are in play on the table, being maybe a power action or like an ancient lightsaber action, something along those lines, then that player would be forced to either claim the battlefield or pass, which is a situation that is not ideal for them, probably. So those are like some really interesting plays that we no longer really have great access to unless you're willing to just use the Running Interference in that situation, which you might, because that's a very powerful play. But I think that play is far less likely to happen now with the Running Interference. I think you're going to see it used exclusively for Never Tell Me the Odds and Concentrate, and basically just to hide your dice.
We'll get into, because for our Worlds Roundup or Worlds Prep, whatever we want to necessarily call it, we'll be talking about Sabine, and we'll actually be talking about Boba 7th also, so we'll be able to dive into some balls and Running Interference.
We're going to call it, let's go World's Hype.
World's Hype. Boom.
Isn't that what you guys say, you youngins? World Hype. Yo, that's lit. It's lit, dude.
Oh, your dad is really just coming out in this episode.
Yeah, I know. I'm embracing the old man.
But so I'm not going to dive into Running Interference with Sabine just yet and how that affects her, as we'll dive into that in a little bit. But I actually think this hurts Obi-Wan Maz more than it hurts Sabine, because Obi-Wan Maz would really need it several times throughout a game, I feel like, because at least Sabine could still ambush action into Never Tell Me the Odds, right? Whereas Obi-Wan can't really ambush action into Alter or Concentrate, right? He would still have to roll in and leave his dice out there for a turn and then have to use Running Interference for Concentrate or whatever. So there's still a chance that his heavy hitter dice could get removed in that step between rolling out and playing Concentrate. So I think it hurts him a lot more than it hurts Sabine.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it does hurt that deck more. I think what it does is again, we'll talk about it more later when we talk about the world's hype.
All right, so we'll move on to our...
you like the way I enunciated that? Yeah.
10 out of 10. Would recommend. Would put it on loop and listen to in my bedroom.
You know what? That was for you, Mr. Chip. That was my pregnant pause.
Pregnant pause. You and Mr. Chip, you guys are just weirdos.
Dude, I think he does such quality stuff. I love the just the audio quality and how together, and he's hilarious. I love him.
Dude, I don't know what he tweeted out today earlier, but it was like TTS, but like a whole new scheme of TTS. Like the middle part had like a picture of Thrawn, and like next to it had numbers. So like when you call Thrawn, you could just hit that number, making it easier.
Oh, wow.
If you roll out Kylo 2, it has the colors right there that you could like ping or click, it looks like, I guess. And
that's great.
And apparently like around the mat, there's little symbols, but you could pick different content creators on there. So like he's got us, he obviously has himself. He's got Artificery, Knights of Ren, Hyperloops, I Rebel. Like he's got like all these different places. And so you can like stream or play and still be able to use your favorite podcast or your own podcast if you happen to be running one also. So
that's really sweet. That's cool.
Yeah, he just tweeted a picture out, so I don't exactly know how to get it or when it's coming out or anything like that. He's a mysterious and kind of shady guy, as are all Rochesterians, as they're called, right?
yeah, we'll go with that.
Of course. So that'll be cool. Yeah. All right. So we'll get to the second errata, and this one is on Maul's lightsaber, and it should now read: blue character only. Power action. If an opponent has no shields on all of their characters, spend 1 resource to roll this die into your pool. Context. The potential damage that this card can deal each round is too efficient. Adding a resource cost to the power action results in a more balanced card. Thoughts, Thomas?
My thoughts are that I think that they actually kind of nailed both of these changes in my opinion, because I think that what happened is they didn't just crush any deck. There was no one card that they were like has dominated, and I think that's good, because the general populace of Destiny players seem to be in agreement that it is a balanced format right now, and we're all excited to take this in the worlds. I know personally I want the best player to win worlds. I want that player to practice. I want that player to know his or her matchups. I want that player to put the work in. I think that's a big part of being successful at an event. And to change things drastically with only a short period of time till worlds, I think would be a mistake on FFG's part, unless there was a severe issue in the meta. But I think we can agree that there wasn't. And I think that both these changes, you can make a strong argument for that there were issues. I'm not as high on the running interference change as I am on the Maul's lightsaber. I think that the Maul's lightsaber change is a great change in the sense that without the power action, its die sides are worth the 3 resources. Yes, it doesn't have redeploy on a 3-cost upgrade, which we know is not ideal. Tiny Grimes has preached that from the beginning, and I agree with that. But I think that its damage potential makes it worth 3 resources anyway. This change to add 1 more resource to it feels balanced in turns that you have an abundance or surplus of resources. You'll be able to use its power action to great effect, but it will really limit the ability to have a 1-turn kill or an early turn kill like on your first turn. I think it's going to make that much tougher. One more resource on your first turn is not as easy to come by. And I think that's a change, a positive change. I don't want to say it doesn't kill OTK. I don't believe it kills OTK. I do think it power checks it from being a first turn killer all the time, or at least it cuts down the percentage a great deal, in my opinion.
No, I totally agree. I still think both Boba 7th and OTK are still very viable decks, still very good decks, but it kind of lets people counter this power action in 2 ways, by taking shields and by disrupting resources, which I think is a good way to kind of create that balance, make it a little bit more enjoyable to play against Maul Saber.
I agree. I think that it's also interesting to think about matchup wise. and we can get into that more later, but, Hondo Yoda, both shields and disruption in the same deck could be a good recipe to counter specifically Maul's lightsaber. Maybe not that like either of those two decks, but that lightsaber could definitely counter.
Man, I've been really loving me some Yoda Hondo lately.
Yeah, it's
just putting it out there.
Super solid deck. It's very good. Blue-yellow package on the hero side specifically, very strong.
Yeah. All right, so those are the erratas. We are going to dive into them a little bit more and the impacts on both Sabine, and then we can talk about, if we want to, more of the impact on OTK, but more specifically Boba 7th as those, as that is our deck, one of our decks today. So we're going to go into the card clarifications, and we have one with Retreat on page 24. Retreat. It says, then end the action phase is a delayed effect that will occur after the additional action has been taken or after the opponent declines to act. Yeah, it does.
Yep.
I mean, that seems...
I guess if it wasn't clear that, the end of the action phase is delayed. So I guess if you didn't take an action, people could try to be in like a passing loop or something along those lines. So...
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Like if they pass, it go back to them and they pass. But I don't know.
I thought it was pretty clear before, but again, agreed. I get it. So maybe because of other cards or clarifications that have been made, this was made to just, keep it on the up and up and make sure that it didn't become an issue or anything became unclear.
And that's it for Awakenings. There are none in Spirit Rebellion. And now we're back to Empire at War for card clarifications. The first one is Battle of Wills. If multiple players are tied for the lowest combined value, remove all character dice just rolled by each tied player. I think that's a good clarification. It didn't really implicitly say that on the card. So some people just reading it might not know to do this if it was tied between you or your opponent. So I think this is, a pretty good clarification. It's one that is helpful for new players and stuff. So.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's a card that doesn't see a ton of play, but I agree that is fine. But this next one I've used, man, this just ruins all my decks, this next clarification.
Dude, oh my gosh. Like, all right, so if you're listening to this and you thought you could do this, like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend you, but like, how this ever needed clarification is beyond me. So it's the EMP grenade. And it says this special ability cannot discard a droid character from play. It literally says it like in the rules reference. The only way to get rid of a character is by defeating it, not by like discarding it.
Nah, dude, your IG88's dead. Later, K2.
See you, K2. See you, Battle Droid. But like even then, like people would say like, oh, it doesn't count for them because theirs says like droid character or droid something, or doesn't necessarily say it. Whereas the battle droids literally just said droid, and so they thought they could discard battle droids. But I'm like, there's no way that a 2-cost upgrade can just discard a character.
No, you're wrong, Jack. You're just wrong.
No. Well, I'm clearly not.
Yeah. So now that they changed it, K2SO is going to take over the meta.
Yeah, man. Jay from Double Blanks is going to make K2 Ray 1 the best deck in the meta. I think that's what he ran during the Empire War. That was his regional deck. There's a chance, man. There's a chance.
Listen, if you pull off a ready on K2, he's a scary dude.
Absolutely. I mean, resets. I mean, OTK is based all around resets.
Resets are amazing. That was my entire Gen Con deck was based on just resetting Kylo Ren and redeploying all the weapons from 9s over to him. It was, I know it's brutal. And just imagine those dice sides, like being able to reset a character like K2 who has a 2 and a 3. Like that could be absolutely brutal. It's expensive. It's expensive, man. All right. So then our last clarification for Empire at War is running interference. And it says this ability only triggers and can be used on one of the 6 actions listed on page 13. Card abilities that are similar to actions, such as resolving dice with Maz Kanata, cannot be used to trigger running interference. A player choosing a pass on their turn is considered to have taken a turn, and the delayed effect of running interference will expire at the end of that turn. So the first one, I think a lot of people knew, but running interference was a pretty confusing card, hence why Bobby Sapphire from the Hyperloops had to make a whole video about it. Yeah. So if you want like really good examples and you're still confused about it, I would just point you
that way. But this also helps clarify, some people would try to play Sabine, activate her and then say you couldn't play a card because they played the card from their discard pile, but your action was activating. It wasn't playing a card. You just got to do that with the activation. And then they mentioned Maz Kanata, right? Your action is activating Maz. It's not resolving dice, even though her activation lets you resolve dice. So it's whatever action you actually decide you're going to do that you can tap run interference for.
Yes, another thing that I've seen come up is people ask about, you can't activate a character and then I play hit and run to then activate my character. I didn't. Activating my character was not the action that I took. Playing a card was the action I took. Then the card instructed me to activate that character. So that's another common misconception when it comes to running interference. But yeah, I would check out Bobby Sapphire's running interference video. I have not personally watched it, but their content is on the up and up, and they're arguably the best players in the world.
I watched it, so I'm clearly a bigger fan. So it's good.
I don't know if you're a bigger fan. He's a nice guy. I really like him.
They are. They're good guys at that. Ooh, whoa. Yeah. How's Nicole feel?
Nicole doesn't know. Well, she doesn't know.
That's awkward.
Yeah. Hope she doesn't listen to
this. Probably not.
Yeah, there's a good chance.
And the second part of the clarification has to do with was what prompted Bobby Sapphire to make that run interference video, because at that Las Vegas one, it was incorrectly ruled that if you pass, then the layover of run interference still goes to your next turn. And this just kind of clarifies that doesn't, because that would be insane.
That just goes to show like the different metas throughout the country. Like that's never even come up at any event that I've been at, and I've traveled for many events in our area to go to, and it's funny to see how different metas perceive things, and it just becomes commonplace and people accept it, and things aren't even questioned anymore. And it can happen anywhere. Our meta could be doing something drastically wrong in some way, because I think it was in John Bruno's game, who's like, a Game of Thrones world champion, I think a multiple time world champion. So he's obviously a great, gamer, and it can still happen. People can still get, misconceptions about how cards work.
Yeah, it happens, man. It happens. All right, so that is it for the Empire War, and now we're going to move on to Legacies, which has a few clarifications in it. The first one is Dr. Aphra. You cannot draw a card from an opponent's card or die effect that deals indirect damage to you. So basically, if your opponent deals damage to you, you can't do, you can't
just trigger her ability. Double clarified. They clarified it on the indirects wording, and they also clarified it here.
Yep.
With Aphra herself.
Just the two things now go together, and there's definitely no way anybody can argue that you draw when you deal indirect that came from an opponent's die or something like that. So cool. This next one actually hurts the most. I'm really disappointed. It's for Greedo, and it says this ability is self-referential. You only roll dice that are on his card into your pool. His dice that are already in your pool do not get rolled or do not get re-rolled. I'm just disappointed because now I can't bring my 500 Greedo dice to Worlds, and once I kill Greedo, roll 500 Greedo dice into the pool.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jack. They pooped on your parade there. That's unfortunate, man.
That was like my key. That was like everything I've been training for.
I wanted somebody to take a video of you being stopped by TSA and then just be like, what are these 637 dice? Oh, those are all Greedo dice.
You don't understand. For anybody that
I need them.
Anybody curious about where that joke is coming from, you might have seen it on Discord or anything like that. Greedo's wording says, before this character is defeated, roll any number of his character dice into the pool, then resolve any number of his character dice in the order of your choice. So it's like, people joke around saying, oh, any number of his character dice, and like then you just dump 500 Greedo dice onto the table. So that obviously needed clarification.
Hit you for 47 indirect.
Yeah, really. There's your one turn kill.
32 ranged.
You play only Greedo. You literally just run one character Greedo and just wait for them to kill you.
Greedo and as many blue characters as you can. Spot blue, price of failure.
Yeah. Dude, that's the dream. That's the dream. So that makes sense, though. I don't think anybody ever actually tried to roll more than they actually had of Greedo. I think the clarification comes from his dice that are already in the pool do not get re-rolled, which I think is important, as that's something I've seen people display.
That is important to clarify. Yes, we are, as much as we're making it a joke, it is important to clarify.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of the biggest things sometimes I'll see on TTS, people playing with Greedo and they kill him and they re-roll the dice. I'm like, no, you're showing a blank. You get that blank. That's all you get. That is that for Greedo. Next one is Hasty Exit. You must control the battlefield in order to give control of it to an opponent. Seems self-explanatory. Don't know that needed clarification necessarily, but I guess it did.
I'm not sure. I'm sure there are people that have asked that question. I mean, we're not, not all the people reading the rules reference guide are competitive. And it might be people who are trying to prepare for a competitive event. So I applaud any clarifications.
Yeah, I'm a jerk, so you can just ignore the comments that I say and something.
No, I'm trying to reel my jerkiness back by saying that.
You're the good one. All right, you're the good cop. I'm the bad cop. Let's roll with it.
Oh, okay.
The next one is Jar Jar. The first ability is considered a use a card action. If the second ability resolves and Jar Jar Binks has none of his character dice in a pool, then all dice will be re-rolled. I think this is actually a really good clarification on both parts, so I'll be the good cop here, dude. Sorry. The first one I think is good because, this came up with the run interference play, so I think you'll see this less because run interference probably won't be used as much for activating characters. But, technically, you could roll out Sabine, say your opponent can't roll in, play Never Tell Me the Odds, say your opponent can't play a card, and now you're showing all this damage. Technically, they could just activate Jar Jar with use a card action, right? And just re-roll everything?
So Jar Jar's action says any player may roll this character into the pool, correct?
Here, I'll bring it up on the database right now, and it says, any player may take an action to force you to activate this character, and so that is now a card action.
Yes.
Use a card action.
That is a use a card action. You are not activating the character. The use a card action is instructing you to activate the character.
Yep. I think any player playing Sabine, or should know that. But that'd be really funny if somebody never tell me the odds. You can't activate, can't play a card. All right, I'll use a card action, activate Jar Jar.
I think the second one is actually really interesting. If the second ability resolves and Jar Jar Binks has none of his character dice in the pool, then all dice will be re-rolled. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think this has to do potentially with fast hands is what is popping into my mind right now. Like if you roll out his dice, you fast hands it, what happens? Yeah,
because you would as the controller of Jar Jar, you would determine the order of the after effects. So you could choose to resolve a die before checking to see what the symbols are and forcing a reroll, which would give you that flexibility, which is really interesting. I mean, fast hands may be a waste on Jar Jar, but that's just a really fun, cool interaction.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So that's that for Jar Jar. I think both of those were good clarifications. Next one we have is Unbreakable. This ability can remove a die showing a value of 0 if your character have no shields. Makes sense.
Yep.
So it says remove a die equal to the value of the shields on your characters, and obviously if they have 0 shields, you can remove a value of 0, which importantly is specials. Is probably the thing you're most looking to do with that. So Unbreakable is always online for those specials.
That is true.
That is that for Unbreakable. And Vandalize looks to be the last one. And it says, you do not remove any of your character dice to discard a supporter upgrade that costs 0 from play.
Am I good cop or bad cop?
Dude, be bad cop. Just do it. Let loose.
Oh, that's stupid. I can't believe anybody would think that. Jeez.
Well,
is that good?
Tommy, people will get confused from Surgical Strike, which was a remove a die. So, we should be nice.
I'm just kidding. No one's stupid. I take it back. I'm sorry.
I do get the confusion that came from that in relation to Surgical Strike, because since they are relatively similar cards, right? Surgical Strike says remove any number of your red dice showing range damage, increasing the values by 1 to discard a support from that play that costs equal to or less than the combined value of those dice. And since the value is based off what was showing on that red die with range damage, you can't remove 0. because then if you remove 0 dice, there's nothing to base that value off of. Where Vandalize says remove the amount of dice, of character dice, to remove a support or upgrade from play. So you could do that and remove 0 dice to remove a 0 cost support or upgrade or whatever. So
no, it's a good clarification. When you take that into account, that previous one, I think that it's always good to have that. That is a gray area, and I think that was a good clarification. It's not something that, again, I've seen come up, but I could see how someone may be confused or just hesitant on the exact interaction that has when removing or discarding a support or upgrade that costs 0.
So that is that for the clarifications. And the last part that we have is in the FAQ. There are 2 new added additions. And the first one says, if a player plays lore, let's look that up just so we have that lore. So I'll read lore after this. So if a player plays lore and chooses Sabine Wren, and her before ability plays a weapon with ambush, who takes the first additional action? Because lore basically says ambush, choose an opponent's character or support and force them to activate it if able. And then they're just asking if Sabine were to play an ambush weapon, who takes that ambush action first. And it says the player that played lore would take the first additional action. When lore resolves, that additional action is created first, followed by Sabine Wren's activation, and additional actions are taken in the order that they were created. So that just clarifies that, which I think was a pretty good question to ask.
Sure, and I know that we have a queue for card abilities, and it's, I don't want to use the same term, but it's first in, first out for how actions take place after that in situations like this. Just as this clarification states, where you almost have a separate queue where actions enter and not abilities, just the actions. So you could say, obviously the lore additional action would take place from that card because it entered that action queue first, if you wanted to call it a queue.
So that is that. And the second one on the FAQ is for game effects, is 0 considered an odd or even number? And it says 0 is an even number. Seems like it makes sense. I don't think anybody ever played it the other way, other than Shane, who would argue that 0 is not an even number. But it's like, Shane, come on. It's clear what they're trying to do. Stop being a jerk, man.
Shane will argue anything.
I hate that kid.
He'll argue anything.
Seriously, dude.
Poop smells great, Tom. I don't know what you're talking about. He's an idiot. Get back on your dial-up.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. His parents were on the phone again, and he couldn't get on the internet tonight. That's the real reason he's not here again.
It's tough, man. It's tough. My mom had to make that long-distance call,
and so he doesn't get that access. Poor kid. Poor kid. All right, so that is all the updates to the rules reference. If you guys have any questions, of course, feel free to ask if you're still confused about anything, or if there's something that wasn't clarified and you guys aren't sure. Never be afraid to ping us on Discord or contact us on Facebook or shoot us a question on Twitter or whatever it might be. So those are clarifications, and also give us your opinions on running interference and Maul's lightsaber. And this is a chance for us to dive a little bit more into those changes. So with our world's lit, what was it called again?
Hype. World's hype.
World hype.
Yo.
All right, with our world hype, we are going to get into Boba 7's sister first. I'm just going to start out and just say that out of all the decks in the meta, this is the one I probably hate the most because of how it plays. And so before I get into it, of course, I'm going to clarify that there's going to be a difference between somebody who picks up this deck for the first time and somebody who's been running it, and player skills, and of course all those things. But to me, this feels like a throwback to the days of Emo Twins, where it was the second Darth Vader and first Kylo Ren, where you just rolled your dice out and you pitch a reroll, max damage, boom, there you go. And to me, this deck always feels like the same way. You're just rolling out. It's oh, I rolled a resource on Maul Saber. Boom, bait and switch. +4. Here's 6 to 8 damage in your face. All right, your character's dead. Thank you. And that's that. And I just never enjoyed playing against those decks. And of course, like I said, there's skill involved. I know, I'm not saying there's not. But I just never enjoyed playing with or against these type of decks. But this one, and I do think now, Now with Maul Saber being hit, we're going to see even more like fine-tuned versions of these, because I feel like you could run this deck with like 20 decent cards or like 25 decent cards, and the last 5 of them could just be whatever. But it's still a really good deck because Maul Saber can just destroy people, and you didn't have to worry about those last few cards of your deck. But now with that being changed a little bit, you're really going to have to fine tune those last few cards to make sure you're making money to be able to afford not just playing Maul Saber, but affording its power action every time, because Boba 7th is pretty starved for resources anyways.
Yeah, it's good in the sense that you have 2 characters that deal similar amounts of damage. Boba Fett's scales a little bit depending on the board state and what kind of die values are out there. And 7th is nice because she's blue and can have Maul's lightsaber, as well as rolls in an additional die in the Seeker Droid. So you've got 2 characters that are perfectly capable of finishing the game by themselves. You're not playing one of the decks that has, a big one character like a Vader, a Sabine, an Obi-Wan. There's no one character that makes the deck go around, even a Bro TK, where when 7th dies, it's over. So this deck is perfectly capable of winning the game after one of its characters dies, either character. It's going along those lines. It's similar. It's not as important playing against it. It's not as important who you choose as your first target. A lot of people make the argument for 7th so that you don't have to deal with Maul Saber, but I don't think that is always necessarily the right answer. If you're playing maybe hero vehicles and you're still running, say, the Resistance Bomber, you might want to kill Fett because you don't feel like rolling out a 6 and then having his special hit you for 6 direct. But it's a solid deck. It's seen a lot of success. It's blown up in popularity. I know that there was some guys in Florida that played it first, and it didn't have the best showing at the event. It seemed to cannibalize itself, but it really has blown up since then and seen a huge spike in popularity.
I think this shot up once OTK shot up too a little bit. Like once people realized the power of Maul Saber, that first came out with OTK with Joe in New Jersey, and then people run an OTK a lot. But then people started to really try to abuse that with Boba 7th, and then now that's everywhere because that's not just a good deck, but it was a good counter to OTK at the time too.
Yeah, I don't think it doesn't use Maul Saber in the same way that OTK does. In quite the same way. It's similar, but I don't think it is as dependent on the power action. I think that if the power action happens, it's nice, but it's you're not like continuously re-rolling in 7th die, so you don't have a lot of, and adding Seeker Droids, you don't have a ton of focus and a ton of melee damage to pair it with without a bunch of upgrades. So it's not in there as much for the big re-roll, for the second roll in. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, you're not built around it. I think it has nice synergy with Boba because it's got solid damage sides. You've got a 3 and a 4 on there, so you play that and you've got a 33% chance that Boba's special is worth at least 3, which is nice. But I mean, with the errata, in a deck that runs tight on resources anyway, I think you'll see them use the power action even less than they were. I don't think it's going to impact the deck to the point where it removes it from the meta entirely.
It's tough because I feel like the biggest, like the games that I lost or would lose to 7th Boba would be the ones where they get a first turn Mauls and not only just resolve it with base melee sides, but use Boba's special to do that. Also to get, like you said, that extra 3 or 4 damage from his ability. But now, I don't know, like I do think it takes a hit with that, but I still think it's a really good deck. Like I don't think it's something that I would tell somebody to not play this. Like this is still a very viable deck for Worlds.
Absolutely. I think, and like you said, you have to have the reps. The player skill matters for sure. But this is a deck that probably is not terribly difficult to learn how to use. It's a pretty standard aggro deck with some forgiveness in the sense that there's not one character that your deck is built around. So if Sabine dies, you're Ezra's not winning, or maybe single die Yoda's not winning. But if one of these characters die, you're still very much in the game, especially if you have a few upgrades out. Its removal package doesn't always hit multiple dice, but it's very resource effective. It's not an expensive deck to run the removal package. It runs a lot of, you'll see a lot of doubt. You'll see a lot of hidden motive. He doesn't like you. There'll also be some resource generation cards, whether it's truce or well connected or something along those lines. And then you always have to watch out for the bait and switch play, which sucks. Sometimes you got to play around it and they don't have it, and sometimes you got to act like they don't have it, or just act like they don't have it and take your licks when they do. It's a rough card sometimes, but it's something that you always have to keep in mind when you're playing against a villain yellow deck. And you can definitely get burned when there's a card like Maul's Saber in there, and you can flip up into a base side or even Maul's Saber into the +4. That's a big shocking amount of damage to take.
I think that's the thing I hate the most about the deck is bait and switch. I cannot stand that card. I hate it so much.
Bait and switch is a great card. It is extremely powerful.
Yeah, it is. It's just, I don't know. I hate it. It's awful. It's like everybody talks about like action cheating. It's like this one just literally lets you to flip to whatever and resolve.
Well, you got to be showing a resource side. So, you gotta think about that, Jack. You got to think resource side. I got to expect this damage. Time to, whatever it might be, play that Force Illusion or shield up or something like that, and remove the resource. Discard cards from their hand.
Tommy, just let me. It seems like every content creator has a card they hate. All right, Sir Christopher had Vibroknife. Jay has Force Illusion. Mr. Chip is running interference. Just let me have this, dude. Just let me.
All right, you got it. Bait and switch. Man, you picked from like the middle of the barrel on that one.
The least impressive of any card. I hate it the most.
I think it's a card that burns a lot of people. I'm not saying it's a bad. I think it's a great card. I think it's an awesome card. 0 cost, ambush. It's a great effect that people will forget, and especially when you get into the later rounds and people are checking out. It's a long day sometimes at these big events, and that's a card that you gotta intentionally keep in mind when you're playing against these decks. You need to sit down, you see what you're playing, and you should have a little checklist in your head, things that you need to remember. Oh, I'm playing Seventh Sister Boba Fett. What are some things, Jack, that you think should be in the front of your mind throughout that game?
And their deck, so obviously, as we talked about bait and switch, as we talked about, they're probably going to try to get out Maul Saber. But in terms of removal and stuff like that, the event cards and stuff, there's been a few of them that have been running Close Quarters Assault. It's not a perfect deck for it because Boba Fett obviously only has the 1 melee side, but with 3 dice on the Seventh Sister, I still think it's a pretty good call.
It is a good call because the upgrades are usually providing 50% melee sides. So if you can hit 2 cards, which you should be able to do if Seventh Sister is alive and you have an upgrade on the table, I think it's a decent include, and it's a good meta call if Pro TK is still viable specifically.
Yeah, and that's something too. If you're playing this deck or you're playing any deck with Close Quarters, don't necessarily just try to go for the blowout. I mean, removing 2 cards for 0 cost is still huge.
Yeah, it's massive. Especially if you're the more cards your opponent plays in a turn, I think the higher the value is on discarding them. So if you discard their last 2 cards and they're showing garbage, that's great. Or if you discard their last 2 cards and you still got 2 rerolls, even if your dice aren't great, now you know that you can aggressively reroll for damage without threat of removal.
It could be such a blowout card. It's like you said, you do it when your opponent can never reroll anymore, right? They're not showing too much. So they're maybe doing, I don't know, like 3-4 damage, nothing crazy. And then you're pitching a reroll to max damage and hit for 14. Like it's such like those turns where you hit that effectively and do it right could be just huge game changers.
Absolutely. That's a great card to keep in mind. So you got on your checklist, you got bait and switch. You need to keep that in the front of your mind the entire game. You got Close Quarters Assault. You got to think about that the entire time. And then the other thing that I would say is, from a defensive standpoint, I would say keep Maul's lightsaber in mind. So, have shields, disrupt resources, things like that. Those are things to keep in mind with that. From an offensive standpoint, I would try to abuse the fact that they don't have a lot of ways to affect 2 dice. Feel Your Anger is a blowout card if you give them an opportunity where you've got a dozen blanks on the table. If you roll out a character into 2 blanks, you might not want to roll out your next character if you're playing against the blue villain deck. You might want to think about re-rolling or, resolving what you have at that point, if anything, because you don't want to walk into that giant feel your anger play. But that's a low percentage card, even though it has a high ceiling. It's not always going to affect multiple dice. And the other card that could affect multiple dice that you may see would be overconfidence. So those are really their only options, for the only ones that we're seeing played, at least, that are affecting multiple dice. It's not like you have to worry about into the garbage chute or easy pickings in this matchup. So you have a little leeway offensively for you have a little less to worry about in their removal package, I think. The nice part is that most of it's free.
Yeah, most of it is free. So even if they're sitting on no resources, you have to be aware of the doubts. He doesn't like you, as you mentioned. And yeah, really, like you said, the only big blowout play is Feel Your Anger, but you should be ready and able to see that. I mean, if you roll out and hit double blanks, and they just remove both those right there's nothing you could do about that. But like Tommy said, if they don't do it then and they're still sitting on a resource, maybe you pitch to re-roll. And if they don't have any in their discard pile or anything like that. So those are just stuff to be ready. For this deck, Tommy, what do you think are good matchups? Like, what do you think this deck is able to beat? It has a good matchup against.
I think that this deck matches up well against decks that have that, like I've said multiple times, that one character that really makes the deck go round. I think that this deck is aggressive enough to be able to kill that character, and because those decks are also aggressive, by the time they kill one of your characters, if you've killed their one big damage dealer, you should be able to walk away with a victory. So maybe in the realm of like a Sabine Ezra, Obi Maz, maybe a Bro TK, I think that you have the ability to churn out damage at a rate similar to those decks, but have a little more staying power because you're more evenly split with your damage output among your own characters.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that was going to be exactly what I said. Those decks where there's one big character and a little character, those are the ones I feel like they could just outpunch you in the face. Even if, like I said, like Sabine too, like I have to be so careful because I could kill, one of their characters, but if I leave myself too open, they could easily just punch right back and blow Sabine off the board. So
yeah, I mean, it's a rough tightrope to walk with those decks. You're definitely having a little more risk when you're playing a deck with one character that makes the whole thing go around. And I think that's why you're seeing this deck being as popular as it is, because it is a little more forgiving as long as you get something out of that first character. So let's say that they kill your seventh sister. If you've dealt, even just 4 damage with her, then you've got something. One of their characters is just about half dead. If Boba can finish them off before he gets any damage on him or minimal amount of damage on him, then you can close the game out if he has any upgrades.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And bad matchups for this deck. I think the worst one is probably Hondo, but he could still even just punch Hondo in the face real quick. I just think this is a deck where you probably want to play an upgrade every turn. And if you're spending those resources, then you're going to be able to get hit, by Hondo pretty hard. So I think he's probably one of the better counters against this deck. And he also doesn't really have big dice sides, especially like him and Yoda. I mean, most of them are really like 1 or 2s, and that's about it. Because they're specials. Yeah. So
I agree that that's a deck that could potentially give this deck problems on paper. I haven't played that matchup, but I could see why it might be good for them. Possibly Hero Vehicles could be a good matchup, or at least like a 50-50 matchup, because you're playing a deck where you losing a character isn't as impactful. Granted, you need time to ramp up into vehicles, which sometimes this deck has the ability to just, start too fast for a hero vehicle deck. But if you can weather the storm, it gets to be quite a storm, and it can do the long-term amount of damage to eliminate them. There's only a total of 21 health in the deck, so an indirect damage deck isn't necessarily afraid of 21 health. Maybe Tarkin 7th, even though that's not really a popular deck, I think could potentially keep up with this. The downside of Tarkin 7th would be that you have a harder time eliminating a specific character because your damage gets, at least a portion of your damage will be spread amongst both characters. where they may be able to just eliminate your sister or your Tarkin. So I think that actually would be in favor of Boba 7th on paper, at least.
I dig it. Any final thoughts on the Boba 7th deck?
No, I think we covered it. The upgrade packages are pretty standard. You'll see outside of, I guess Vibro Cutlass is a card that you'll see in this deck occasionally for the redeploy, the overwrite redeploy, that you probably don't see in a lot of other decks. But outside of that, most of the cards you'll see overlap, and you'll see them in other decks as well. So I think we covered just about everything.
All right, so that does that for Boba 7th. This has been like the most played deck since it kind of broke out onto the scene, I think. So if you're going to Worlds, you want to be testing against this.
Agreed.
Know that matchup.
Very much agreed.
All right, cool. So that is that for that one. And our second deck we're going to talk about today is Sabine X. So whether that's Yoda, Ezra, or Poe-2 are the three common variants. I myself have played Sabine Ezra a good amount. And as we talked about earlier with the run interference hit, do I think that Sabine can still survive with the run interference hit? That's definitely a yes. Sure, it stinks. As Tommy mentioned, you can't keep up with the tempo, but half the times I would really saw run interference as a luxury card. It's like, okay, I can stall you here. That's fine. I could do this here. That's cool. But really all I wanted it for was never tell me the odds play. So me being only able to use it once is still okay. I'd still probably play it like normal. But it's not a huge deal that it's hit. It definitely hurts the deck, but I still think Sabine I still think she's going to be good. I still think she's going to be at Worlds, in some type of force. More so with Yoda, more so with Ezra. I think Poe might be the worst variant of that, but I also don't know. That's not a hard fact.
Well, I agree. I think that she will be present, and I also agree that of the three known iterations, the Ezra, Yoda, or Poe deck, I think that the most popular will be Ezra and Yoda. I'm not sure how much running interferences errata has impacted the deck overall outside of the tempo purposes. The big play is still there. The Never Tell Me the Odds play is awesome. Part of me wants to say that the Yoda version might have might be a little less dependent on running interference, because you can do really interesting things with Force Speed and Yoda with his special to really add a layer of consistency to your Sabine dice.
I was going to say, I was going over this in my mind with Sabine Ezra and with Sabine Yoda, because those are the two variants I've really played the most. Ezra more so, like 80 to 20% in that favor. But the 20% that I played with Yoda, I almost think that you could, at this point, now drop running interference and maybe put more mitigation in that deck to keep Sabine alive. And that sounds crazy, but like you said, the plays with Yoda into Force Speed can just be bonkers, and that could be a Force solution potentially, or just not Force solution, Force Speed, or running interference every turn is what I was trying to say. You're
channeling my thoughts, because I was getting to if you're worried about Sabine surviving, I think that Force Illusion is a proactive way. I know it takes an upgrade slot, but it is a great way to keep her alive and, just make sure that she's going to be on the table. I know that Vandalize exists. I know that Vibroknife exists. I know there's ways to play around it. There should be ways to play around every card in the game. But I do think that the Sabine Yoda deck could, the ceiling is lower, because you don't have the chance of rolling out the Ezra +2s, and when that happens, that is wonderful. But I think that one of the things that running interference offered Sabine is the ability to get some rerolls on her dice while protecting her dice, which would add some consistency to her if you didn't hit the ambush play off of her weapon into just max damage right away. I think that running interference could hide your dice and add some consistency and would smooth out your damage curve. Yoda, while not having the +2 sides or the one direct range side that Ezra has, he does bring to the table the shields. He brings to the table some dice fixing, and that force speed could act as your running interference in a sense.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was thinking. And as you mentioned, I think you lose the aggressiveness of Ezra. And like the thing, I love Ezra's +2, but man, his special is huge. And now, especially with Maul Saber being hit and needing that extra resource, his special gets even better, as his worst matchups were the Maul Saber decks.
I agree. Ezra's special is his best side. I mean, the +2 is great if you connect with it, but man, that special does so much for you. You just don't even realize. You gain a resource, they lose a resource is such a huge swing, especially on turn 1 and still on turn 2. It's a huge swing. It really allows you to be able to play the events that you want to play to, again, keep Sabine alive. But man, I don't know. It's so close for me. I don't know if I had to play a Sabine deck. I don't know which of those two I would want to play. It's a tough call. It's a really tough call. I think I would err on the side. I think I might take Yoda because I like to have as much. I like to take as much luck out of the game as I can, and I realize that I will lose games because I don't have the same damage potential as Sabine Ezra, but I think that there are games that I will win because of the consistency that Yoda and the survivability that Blue would bring to the table.
Yeah, and I think another thing too that Yoda opens up is a little bit better of impersonate, since he has 3 more health than Ezra. Mm-hmm. So there's that too. And like I said, that like Sabine Yoda is such like those 30 cards. Like Sabine Ezra, I can barely take a card out, right? Those last few cards, sure, I'm playing around with them a little bit, but it's more of what do I want 1 of, what do I want 2 of? It's not like I'm this cycle of cards I'm trying to fit in. It's more of like I'm trying to fit all this stuff in. Where can I make room for it?
Yeah.
Whereas you're now adding Blue to that mix. Like, oh my gosh. Like now you have to make room for force speeds, really. And I would even say you got to make room for force illusions, although I could see the argument that you have second chance that it might be okay. But either way, I could see that. So there's at least potentially 4 cards you're now trying to make room for when I could barely find room for another card in that yellow only deck.
Yeah.
So that's just the tough part is, sometimes you might make a suboptimal deck trying to cram Blue in there. But like I said, I think I don't have play testing with it, but part of me does think you might be able to drop her interference from the Yoda version of the deck.
Yeah, I mean, if you drop running interference, then you could drop Never Tell Me the Odds, but if you're running force speed, it's still a play that you could make. Because you could even do something like, you could roll out Yoda, use his special to turn force speed to a special, gain $1 to go from 2 to 3 resources, Never Tell Me the Odds, you know what I mean? Resolve Sabine's dice. So there are some really big plays in that deck. I mean, it's still got huge upside. All you need is 1 upgrade on Sabine, and you're going to be threatening to kill characters every turn.
Absolutely. So I like it a lot. I definitely, with the rules reference change, I definitely want to be testing out. I still have no idea what I'm bringing to World.
I thought you were bringing Tarkin 7s.
No.
No?
I played Joe and I smacked him around, dude. The guy wanted to quit the game.
Wow. He is scrub.
No, but that is one of the decks.
Shane too much.
Yeah, yes. I've actually been playing a lot of Tarkin Afro. I really like it a lot. Yeah. No, that is one of my decks, but I'm also looking at Sabine, whether it's Ezra or Yoda. And I've got a month to try and figure out what the best optimal decks are for. I mean, Tarkin Seventh Sister, we have found out. Between me, you, and Joe, I think we have a pretty good deck. Or really, between you and Joe, you guys are the ones who play tested that, more than anybody.
Me and Joe went in totally opposite directions. So.
That's true.
I just recently brought him onto Ewok Village, so he was on a totally different path than me with that deck. But he's been playing a lot more than I have, so that deck is out of my mind at the moment.
It's half the time our Discord channel, when we were getting ready to prep for our Worlds, I went over his house, played a bunch of games. Is him. Our Discord was me and him just arguing over deck lists. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna make hero vehicles, but I'm not gonna put resistance bombers in there. I'm gonna put the Fang fighters. And he's like, you're an idiot. And I'm just like, shut up, Joe. You're an idiot.
He's very vocal. I like it though. He gives good input though. He is a great player. I really enjoy having him in there.
Oh, no doubt. It's just funny that every time him and I talk about a deck, we argue.
He has a very unique perspective on the game though.
No, I mean, and he's done well. I mean, he's got a top 4 at Jersey, top 8 at Maryland. Like, he's obviously has a good deck and is a good player. So
let's get back to this deck. And if you're playing against this deck, what are the things that you think you need to be aware of?
if you were playing the Ezra variant, I think you need to be aware of the resource stealing that might potentially happen and be able to play around that. I think you need to realize that if Ezra rolls a +2, you might want to spend your removal card on that, because I don't know if you'll get a better chance to actually remove any of Sabine's die. So that +2 might be the only chance of damage you'll be able to remove.
Yeah, it's a feel bad play, but sometimes you just got to make it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also being aware of the actions that they're about to take, like, you know, after the first turn, they might have a weapon on them, but they might have not drawn another one. So they still have to take that action to pitch, to reroll and stuff like that. Or, you know, whatever their plays might be. Also be aware of how many resources they have, because they're all going to be running hyperspace jump and they're all going to be running Never Tell 'em the Odds. And so if they're sitting on 3 resources, you have to be ready for both of those plays. Loth Cat and Mouse is a pretty good removal that they'll be running. So if they're just leaving one die out there, you should be aware that that is a play that is coming. But yeah, they're just going to be spending a lot of money. And if they go all out to try and kill one of your characters, I think you should respond appropriately and do the same, because if they're spending all their money to play upgrades and roll out, they're probably not going to be able to play a second chance or hyperspace jump to save them. And they also have impersonate too. And sure, that might feel bad, but I'd rather put 6 into Sabine and make them pay $2 to move it over than put 6 in Ezra. So I think you always just got to really just try to kill Sabine as fast as you can.
Yeah, I agree. You do got to kill Sabine. If you kill Sabine, it will crumble. Second chance and potentially Force Illusion are issues. You do need to be aware of the removal package, the into the garbage chutes, the easy pickings, the hasty exits. It's a fast deck. It's probably the one of, if not the fastest deck in the meta. And it needs resources though. It does need its resources. It has big, expensive events that it wants to play, and it has upgrades that it wants to play every single turn. It's going to run Maz's Vault. You might, with the nerf to running interference, you may want to save your Vandalize for the Maz's Vault. If you can be on the battlefield, be on the battlefield every turn. I think you need to weigh that option of, okay, is this the turn that I need to claim the battlefield? It's almost impossible to keep up with them, but you don't want them to get the resource. If you're gonna prevent them from being able to play and Never Tell Me the Odds next turn, and you've already done some damage and you're in an okay position, they haven't rolled you real hot or anything, then maybe it is time to claim the battlefield. That's a total feel play, but it's a tough storm to weather sometimes. But these are the things that you can do to keep in the race. Another card to think of is the Heavy Blaster. A lot of people forget that they have to remove a die when it gets played. So, you know, if it's in the discard pile specifically, just be aware, you know, they're going to make you remove a die. You can also use that to your advantage though. If they really want to play that DL, they're going to hold off on activating Sabine for a little bit. They're going to try to drag their feet till you have dice in the pool. So that could give you a little bit of extra time to set up. And get your feet under you in that round.
Yeah, it's a weird match because you're not just worried about what's in their hand. You also have to be aware what's in their discard pile too, which is like a third dimension of it. And you mentioned Battlefield. I don't know if you actually said it, but in my opinion, I think you should always try to avoid their Battlefield if you win the roll-off. Giving them 2 shields would feel bad, but them constantly staying on 3 resources, because they're just going to outclaim you. I mean, it's just, as Tommy said, like, this is such a hard deck to outpace. And if you focus on claiming early a lot, I think you'll be missing a lot of your damage output, because these, especially like Yoda, even potentially more so, right? Yoda rolls out. Sure, he hits a special on his, and you could even say like a blank on 4-speed. Their next action, they'll roll out Sabine. Their ambush action will be to focus in the 4-speed, take 2 more actions, pitch to reroll, do that damage, and then their next action is going to be claim. So half the time, you're only going to get 3 or 4 actions before they're claiming. So it's just something that's tough, and you have to expect them to outclaim you. And like as you said, giving them starting with potentially 4 resources if they have Maz's Vault is such a bad feeling, and it lets them cycle through their deck even more with that draw the card, because they're always going to be running Outer Rim Outpost.
Yeah, Outer Rim Outpost is pretty much the staple for this deck, and if you're playing a deck like the Hero Vehicles deck and you have Weapons Factory Alpha, it does virtually nothing for them the entire game, and it has the potential of ramping you. So that's definitely a good situation for you to choose your battlefield, even though you don't want to give Sabine any health. It's just going to do. It's in the long term. It's going to pay off in this matchup.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So we're approaching like an hour and a half at this point. So we'll quickly say good and bad matchups for this deck. I think good matchups, Sabine preys on those big little decks that she is, because she can just blow that character off the board and call it a day. But she struggles against those decks that are like Boba 7th, where it has 2 medium characters, as they're called, and able to survive losing one of them and still able to kill Sabine with the other one. And also, I think Sabine needs money, so Hondo kind of hurts at times. But I think she can kill him quickly enough to make that a moot point if need be. So, quickly off the bat, those are kind of my early thoughts. I've never really had an issue with vehicles either. Even though those characters don't matter, I can generally kill them quick enough before they're able to really get a ramp going. But that could have just been who I happen to play against. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. I think that the 3-wide mill deck is also Sabine preys on that quite a bit because it takes a while for them to mill. I don't know about the 2-character mill deck, the Yoda Riken deck. I know that mills a lot faster. I would imagine that Sabine's still probably pretty good in that matchup.
Yeah, a handful of games, maybe 3 or 4 against people on TTS. So take that with what you will. Was able to win, or all 3 or 4 those games, however many I played. So, but who knows who was on the other side, of course. But yeah, so that is that for Sabine. Good deck. You'll be seeing it. It'll be interesting to see how much it shows up, because she kind of got pushed out a little bit, but who knows where she could come back. Anybody could bring her. Some idiot named Jack could end up showing up with her. So, all right. So for closing, of course, guys, we have Facebook, we got Twitter, we got YouTube. And those are just ways you can find and contact us. We're also on Discord and stuff. I'm just Jack -GDP, and Tommy is Tommy-GDP. And Shane, I'll do my best to keep you guys out of contact with him. If you see Twin Sun 77,
Turd Burglar 77. Oh, did he change it to Twin?
Yeah, Twin Suns with a Z 77 is Shane. So never be afraid to reach out to us and ask any questions, ask us to play a game or get thoughts on a deck or whatever it might be. And I also want to give a shout out to all our patrons at this point. So that's Jason Belts, Alan Preston, Jonathan Moss, Lee Price, Michael Eskelson. I believe that's how you say it. And Brian Piana. Big thank you.
We have real Patreons?
Real people with real names, or they're all just Shane.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Well, there could be the chance that Shane's the merch guy now. It could be a chance he's just making all these patrons account and paying us to make it seem like he's doing stuff and promoting us. But I don't know.
That's possible. That's possible.
That's a big thank you to you guys who are not just taking time to listen to our content, but you guys are giving money back and kind of helping us pay off those hosting fees and things like that. So that's a big thank you to you guys. It means so much for you guys to
it's incredible.
Take the time. We've also got Top Deck TCG. If you guys are looking to pick up extra singles, you can go there and buy some. With Worlds coming up, if you are trying to look to complete any of your decks, you can use the promo code Golden Dice 10 to get 10% off your order, which is a pretty good deal. And they already have, in my opinion, pretty good deals. I've received no money from advertising them, but I have bought cards from them myself because they've been a pretty good deal. And lastly, for sponsorship, this one is kind of out of the blue. It is a card game, or party game is what I should say, more so, a party game, Dirty Neighbors. So if anybody's interested or enjoys those type of games with your friends, it's similar to Cards Against Humanity a little bit, in the sense that, somebody is the person that is it, but you are writing cards about them and trying to write stuff and describe them. I personally played it. Again, I'm not receiving any money or anything for giving this advertisement, but I know the owner, and he's a great guy, and the game is super fun. I honestly do bust it out with a lot of my friends, so this has nothing to do with Destiny. But if you guys are looking for an extra party game like this, the game costs $25. But if you go to their website, which is dirtyneighborsgame.com and use the promo code Golden Dice. You'll get 40% off, which is a good chunk.
That is a big chunk.
It's good. And it is, for anybody out there, it is a mature game. It even says that this game is not for you in its description. But it's a good game. So you can definitely check the website if that sounds like you are interested. It's got some cards on there that you can take a peek at and kind of how to play video and stuff like that, contact, anything like that. So, and I honestly do say I play this all the time. It's fun. It's interesting. If you play it with your friends, it can be very interesting. Tommy, do you have any closing thoughts for today's episode?
No closing thoughts. Shane sucks.